In this video, I'm going to go over the implications of the sun being in the third house, and we'll have a look at how it actually manifests or doesn't manifest in three real charts. One for Oprah Winfrey, another for Anton LaVey, and the third will be an unknown person, an anonymous chart. To begin understanding the sun in the third house, let's quickly review what the third house is all about. As you can see in this depiction, the third house is part of the lower quadrant of the sky. It's under the ground, but it's on the eastern side. So the underground has a certain signification. It signifies the internal part of our being. And the east has a certain signification. It's associated with sunrise, which means manifesting and becoming tangible, becoming real. So the third house being the eastern border of the underground portion of the sky. So it's all about expressing and manifesting what we have inside. Expressing the interior. And the first river of meaning that we want to float down is the concept of assertion. Expressing the interior means asserting yourself. And so this is why the third house signifies strength, the ability to assert, the ability to exert force, and have an impact on things and make a difference. Another way to say this is that it has to do with our power. And that's related to not just the raw force of the power, but the skill. How able are we to act upon our desires and motivations? How able are we to express what we want? And thirdly, the assertiveness leads to contest or competition. And so the third house shows our ability to compete and contest and win. So it has a lot to do with sports and athletics and war and fighting. People that we have conflicts with. And who do we have conflict with? Not our juniors, not our seniors, but with our peers, our siblings. So the third house represents the peers and siblings as well. Now, another river that branches off of this basic theme of expressing the interior is the concept of will. This is why the third house depicts the person's decision-making ability, their ability to be decisive. And that directly impacts how much confidence a person has. How confidently do they say yes or no? How confident are they in the answers that they give? How confident are they in their decisions? And how much do they stick by them? So the third house shows the discipline or tenacity of will. It also shows the volume of will. How much will is there? How ambitious is the person? So another way to say that is how lusty or how hungry they are. And finally, will is the expression of I. It's the expression of what I want. So the third house shows a self-focus. How self-focused are we? How important is our will? How important is our desire? How important are our decisions to us? And hence, it is not really a house which lends to cooperation or subordination at all. It's a house that lends to defiance or at least independence and individuality. Well, that was the third house. Now, before we talk about the sun in the third house, let's do a quick review of what the sun is all about. Essentially, the sun symbolizes soul. And soul basically means the quantum of awareness or consciousness. The reason why the sun signifies this is because it's bright, and brightness or light is what enables awareness or perception. So the sun literally signifies light, and light enables vision and visibility. So the sun is very much about vision and visibility. In terms of visibility, the sun signifies how visible you are. How public are you? How extroverted are you? How masculine are you? How willing are you to go out and adventure in the world? And on the concept of the light being vision, it enables vision. Vision means you have a plan. And to enforce your vision means you give commands, you tell people to go a certain way. So the sun signifies commands, order giving, authority, leadership. Besides being the quantum of awareness, the soul is also the essence of what life is. Awareness is the essence of what life is. So saying that the sun represents the soul means that it represents life force. And this is why the sun symbolizes our basic health, the amount of vitality that we have. And since the soul and our life is the focal point or the center point for our being, the sun represents our being, our self. So it has to do with our ego, our identity, our self-esteem. And again, since the self is the core of who and what we are, that's what the sun represents. The core of things, the central things, the stabilizing point. So all in all, the sun represents the soul, and also we can say the king or the boss. Because the boss or the king is the commander, the public, the visible face, the leader, the one who gives the vision, the one who's the most visible, the one who gives the life force to the project, the one who is the identity of the project, and the one who is the core stabilizer of the project. Now we're caught up about what the sun symbolizes and what the third house symbolizes. We can easily discuss what the sun in the third house represents now. All that we really need to do is compare the two symbolic trees and see where they are alike or directly different. In the case of the sun in the third house, the sun and the third house are very similar in their nature. The sun is public, and this third house wants to make the private things public. So when you have the sun in the third house, it indicates a person who is able to be bold, able to be public, able to be forthright and outgoing. So we can describe them as heroic. We can say that they're fearless. They're not timid. They're daring. We can say that they're strong or effective. They're impactful. They will have a leadership capacity to them. And so they'll be attractive in the way of being charismatic and compelling. And they will be a source of energy or motivation or compulsion for others. They will compel others, impel others, motivate others. So they kind of feel like a power plant that gives off energy that other people can use. Secondly, the sun was about the self, and the third house is a self-focused house. And therefore, we expect people with the sun in the third house to be self-okay, self-sufficient, self-motivating. They don't need other people to inspire them. They're already inspired. They have their own lusts. They have their own plans. They have their own desires. They don't need your blueprint. They don't need your wake-up call. Self-establishing. They don't need your ratification. They don't need your approval. They approve themselves. They establish themselves. They do their own work. And non-conformist or unorthodox. They don't need your blueprint. They'll do it their way. So the sun in the third house is quite good at being a leader because the self is very self-contained and competent and isn't afraid to go forth and dominate. Thirdly, the sun is about commanding, and the third house is all about decision-making. So giving commands, giving orders, making decisions. So we can describe this person as being dominant or influential. They take the lead, they are dominant, they make things go the way they want them to go. They establish their vision and they make sure that it happens that way. That is the theory of what the sun in the third house signifies. Now, let's put the theory into practice and look at the sun in the third house in 3 real charts of real people. We have Oprah Winfrey, Anton LaVey, and an anonymous person. First, we said that the sun in the third house represents a heroic, fearless, effective, charismatic, motivational person. Does that match Oprah Winfrey? Super matches Oprah Winfrey. Especially the last part of being like an energy source or a motivational source for other people, but also, if you investigate her early life, very fearless, very daring, very intent on doing her thing. So why is it such a clear and strong match for Oprah Winfrey? Well, one thing quite important is that her sun in the third house is also in a Raja Yoga. And it's in a Raja Yoga with the 10th Lord. So that's really empowering this ability to be a big public figure and a big leader figure and a big source of motivation for others. Secondly, her Mars is aspecting her Sun in the third house. Mars and the third house are very similar in what they represent. So her Sun in the third house is also getting an extra dose of third house-ishness by virtue of being aspected by Mars. Not only that, but her third lord, Saturn, is with Mars. So Mars is really keeping an eye on the third house, really enabling it to have that power that it's supposed to have. And the final thing that I want to say about Oprah's chart that makes it really able to show this potential of the Sun in the third house is that her first house is very good. Because anything about the strength of the self and self-confidence and being a leader cannot come to fruition if the first house isn't also similarly strong. Because the first house represents the self. So why is Oprah's first house so strong? Well, first of all, the first lord has a strong aspect on it. And when the lord aspects a house, that house prospers. And secondly, incidentally, besides this very important point, it's also hosting a moon being aspected by Jupiter, which is very positive. So Oprah Winfrey really matches this well. Let's have a look at the second example chart. Anton LaVey. Is he heroic, fearless, daring, strong, effective, charismatic, motivational type leader? Yeah, very. He started a new religion. Why? Well, first thing that catches your eye is the Sun is not only in the third house, but it's exalted and all by itself. In fact, Anton LaVey is a very masculine type third house leader. And this exalted Sun in the third house all by itself really depicts that well. Secondly, just like Oprah, where there's a lot of martial influence in the chart as well, he has it also by virtue of his moon being opposite to Mars. And like Oprah Winfrey had a solid first house, he does too. Not quite as openly or mainstreamly solid, but solid nonetheless by virtue of his first lord being in its own sign. And the reason why I say not as mainstream of a solidity is because it's in the 12th house. So his stuff is going more to mystical or weird stuff because his moon aspected by Mars is in the 8th house and his first lord in his own sign is in the 12th house. And so within that field of mysticism, which is the background context of the chart, he has a strong self-focus, which is really the essence of his whole religion that he called Satanism, but doesn't really have to do with Satan. It has to do with selfishness. Selfism. And finally, the anonymous chart. This is the chart of a person who is not really a heroic leader, but has that quality somewhere in them. And it's noticeable, but it doesn't really shine in the person. This person does have the aspect of Mars to the third house, much like Oprah did. However, it's her Mars is in a Mercury sign, and her Sun in the third house is in a Mercury sign. Compare that to Oprah, whose Sun in the third house is in a Saturn sign, and whose Mars aspecting it is in its own sign. So she does have an aspect of Mars to her Sun in the third house, but it's not really carrying the same punch that it does with Oprah Winfrey. That's a point of discussion, but it's still not really right on the pulse of what's going on with this chart. Coming closer to the pulse, you might notice that the Sun is very close to Venus, which means that it's swallowing or combusting a debilitated planet. So it's weakening by that. Thirdly, getting right to the pulse of what the problem is with this chart in terms of why does the Sun in the third house not produce a self-confident leader. It's because of her first house. Her first house is Cancer and it has Saturn in it. So that signifies a lot of self-negativity and self-doubt and a feeling of weakness And that self-negativity, that self-doubt, has a direct influence upon the third house and the third lord. So in this case, the fate of the interpretation of the sun in the third house hinges on the fact that Saturn in the first house from Cancer is aspecting it very strongly. Okay, now let's take a look at another quality of the sun in the third house. It's supposed to be self-sufficiency, right? Self-motivating, self-establishing, etc. Nonconformist. Does Oprah match this description? Yes, but except unorthodox. She's not really that unorthodox. She's pretty mainstream. Why? Well, she has a very orthodox first house. She has Sagittarian first house being aspected by Jupiter and hosting a moon, which is in a mutual aspect with Jupiter. So both of those things indicate a strong tendency to respect accepted sources of wisdom. Hence, although she's very self-motivating and self-establishing, she's not exactly nonconformist. Whereas the second chart, Anton LaVey, he's off the hook. He's super nonconformist. The whole reason for choosing Satan as a symbolism was its nonconformist shock value. So why is it that he's so extremely nonconformist? Well, look at what's going on in his fourth house. It's kind of like, if you're really good with astrology, you'll recognize this as the polar opposite of what we just talked about with Oprah Winfrey. Oprah Winfrey had the moon mutually aspected with Jupiter. What Anton LaVey has is the ninth lord directly conjoined Rahu. And to add a little bit more icing to the cake, the ninth lord is directly conjoined Rahu and the eighth lord. So here's a Rahuvian philosopher. This person's religiousness is very Rahuvian. Now, as for the third chart, is this person self-motivating, self-establishing, nonconformist, etc.? Kind of with the nonconformity, yes. But really, on all of these cases, it's again another issue of they try to be, but they don't quite make it. And for the nonconformity thing, this third chart has a lot of similarity to Oprah's chart because it has the conjunction of Moon and Jupiter. And now that our attention is directed to the moon, we might even think, but wait, she's got the moon in Aries. So this person should be kind of bold, shouldn't she? But even that moon in Aries has a lot of aspect from Saturn in the first house. And so again, it comes down to the Saturn and Cancer in the first house. You can't really expect this chart to represent a person who's very self-motivated or getting themselves out of bed, getting themselves on their schedule, getting themselves on their program, getting themselves to follow their desires. Because of all the self-doubt and self-negativity, I don't think I can do it. So why even try? So all the sources of the things that should be making a person individually self-contained and independent and bold, the third house and the Moon in Aries, are being impacted by Saturn being in Cancer in the first house. Finally, the third trait of the sun in the third house is kind of the same really as the other ones. Influential, taking the lead, establishing their vision, etc. Oprah Winfrey, extremely. Why? We already discussed all the same reasons. Anton LaVey, extremely. Why? Same reasons as what we already discussed. And this third person, influential, establishing the vision, yes, but on a small scale. And not so consistently, even on that small scale. Why is there weakness in this third chart? For all the same reasons that we already described. So, I think now you have a clear picture of what the sun in the third house signifies and what kind of conditions in the chart can support what the sun in the third house signifies versus what kind of conditions in the chart can deny what the sun in the third house signifies. If you want to actually have my interpretations for all of your placements in your chart, you can go to my website and order that from the charts page. It's victorcara.com/R2. Thank you so much.